At UFC 322 this Saturday, Jack Della Maddalena will defend the welterweight belt against former longtime lightweight champion Islam Makhachev. Despite being the reigning, defending 170-pound champion, JDM is currently a slight underdog on most betting lines, with the former lightweight champ Makhachev as a slight favorite. I can understand why Islam is the favorite. He was extremely dominant at 155, and he's clearly big enough to be a natural welterweight, and very likely is the better wrestler. However, while I know this fight could go either way, both guys have the tools to win. I'm personally favoring Jack Della Maddalena to win, and I'll explain why in this video. I'm hoping to publish another video tomorrow about how Makhachev can win, because I really believe this fight comes down to who shows up in the best shape and who brings the best strategy to the fight. I'm not sure if I'll have time for that video, but if you like hearing my thoughts on these fights both before and after the event, please like the video and subscribe for more MMA news and views, as well as analysis and occasional documentary-style deep dives. Also, if you have any questions, or if I say something that is incorrect or you disagree with me, please let me know in the comments. I'm just getting back into really actively following the MMA and UFC world after years of not paying attention to it. And I was a huge OG fan back in the day, but there's so many fighters and so much going on these days that it's going to take me a while to really wrap my head around all this. And so I'm sure I'm going to say things that are incorrect or that I'm just not explaining very well. So if you have a question or you want to correct me on something, let me know in the comments. And if what you say is really helpful to the content of the video, I will pin your comment and thank you for it. Anyways, let's get into this fight. Now, the main reason that I think JDM has an edge in this fight is that I think JDM is one of the best strikers Islam has ever fought, but just as importantly, he is going to be probably the first really good striker Islam has ever fought who is as big as him. Now, if we look at Islam Makhachev's record, he's beaten lots of good strikers. Dustin Poirier is a good striker. Alexander Volkanovski, incredible striker. Charles Oliveira, extremely dangerous striker. Bobby Green and Dan Hooker, also excellent strikers. But Volk is a featherweight, and the other guys I just mentioned are all lightweights. Whereas Jack is definitely a natural welterweight. He is around 5'11", which is just about the ideal height for a welterweight. Mind you, so is Makhachev. He's listed as 5'10", so they're right around the same height. They're both the ideal height to be a welterweight. But when Islam has been fighting these other guys at lightweight, they've almost all been significantly smaller than him. And now that does mean that he has to dehydrate himself and starve himself more to get down to that weight. But obviously he was capable of doing it. Obviously he was capable of doing it successfully and being very powerful at that weight. But in this case, it's not so much the strength and size differential that matters. It is the power differential. And in addition to being bigger and more powerful than any of the strikers that Islam has fought in the past, I think Jack is a bit more technical than most of them. Now, he is a guy who seems to be willing to let someone punch him in order to get a punch back. He's not necessarily got the sharpest striking defense, but he has very good footwork. He has very good head movement. He has power in both hands, and he throws excellent combinations, which is really where we see the difference between higher and lower level strikers. And just before I started making this video, I rewatched JDM's last fight, which was against Bilal Muhammad, and I watched Islam's second most recent fight, which was against Dustin Poirier. And Dustin Poirier is a great fighter, very exciting to watch. I love the guy, but he is not anywhere near as sharp a technical striker as JDM. He's also a couple inches shorter. He's definitely a smaller guy, and he's also older. At 29 years old, Jack is right in his prime. The next 3 or 4 years are probably going to be the best years of his fighting career, where he's at the peak of his performance. And then by the time he gets to 36, which is how old Dustin Poirier is, he's going to be starting to decline. And it's not just about your actual chronological age, it's also about your fighting age. So we have JDM, who is 29, we have Islam, who is 34, and we have Dustin Poirier, who is 36. And so Poirier is not just smaller and a less technical striker than JDM, he's also 7 years older, and that 7 years makes a big difference. Okay, I'm 37, and I can promise you that I do not have the same level of physical resilience now that I did when I was 29. And that's not just because I'm not in quite as good shape now as I was then. It's also because of just age, but also the wear and tear that my body's been through over those years. And a professional MMA fighter's body goes through way more wear and tear than mine does. But as I mentioned, it's not just about chronological age, it's also about how many MMA fights you've had over how many years. And Dustin Poirier has been fighting at a very high level in MMA for way longer than Islam or JDM has, and he has a total of 40 fights in his career, including 10 losses, which are often where you take the most damage, whereas Islam has only 28 fights, and JDM has only 20 fights in total. And I think that JDM is going to be quicker, more technical, and more elusive than Dustin Poirier was, but he's also going to be landing harder shots. And while I know that Islam is going to have many advantages in this fight that he didn't have at lightweight, in the sense that he's not going to have to dehydrate himself or starve himself as much to make weight, he's going to be much more comfortable at the weigh-ins as well as that night and the next day walking into the octagon. He's probably going to have better cardio. He's probably going to be stronger and more powerful himself because he doesn't have to limit how much muscle he packs on. And again, he just doesn't have to dehydrate and starve himself as much to stay down to the weight. But that's only on his side. On the other side of the coin, Islam is used to fighting lightweights. He's used to getting hit by lightweights. And the jump from lightweight to welterweight is only 15 pounds, but it's a big difference. And so while I'm sure Islam is going to be healthier and stronger and have better cardio than he's ever had in the past, the shots that JDM is going to hit him with are going to hurt him and tire him out and upset his equilibrium and his breathing and his focus more than probably anything else he's been hit with in his career. And I'm not saying that he's going to walk out there and get hit a couple times and just fall apart. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm sure he's been hit in training by guys who are just as strong, if not stronger, than JDM. But I think that over time, especially as the fight gets to the third and fourth and fifth round, if it goes that far, the damage that JDM does with each strike he lands is going to add up in a way that Islam is not used to. And that may cause him to make mistakes or leave holes in his game, which could allow JDM to score a knockout or a TKO or just win the decision by overall doing more damage. I actually think that Islam's best chance of winning is if he can get JDM flat on his back in the first round. I think if Islam can initiate a takedown or land a few decent shots and knock him down and get on top, I think if Islam can get into a dominant position in the first round when he's still fresh, there's a decent chance that he can get a submission or a TKO because he is vicious in top position. He has incredible submissions. And this is going to be when they're not as sweaty, when he's not that tired, when he can put a lot of muscle into his technique. And so if he can create that scenario, that's where I think Islam's best chance is. But after rewatching JDM's last fight against Belal Muhammad, who is probably not as good a wrestler as Islam, but Belal is a very high-level wrestler. He's a very high-level pressure fighter. And he actually didn't shoot a lot of takedowns in that fight. And I think one of the reasons that he didn't shoot that many takedowns is because JDM was doing such a good job of taking away his opportunities to get takedowns. I think he didn't land his first takedown until the third or fourth round, and all three of the takedowns that Belal did hit in that fight were beautiful. They were like picture-perfect examples of takedown technique where he set them up and he got in unexpectedly and just nailed it. And Belal is a very similar fighter to Islam physically. They're about the same size. Belal is a little bit older. And again, I'm sure Islam is probably the better wrestler of the two. But with the kind of fight IQ and the positional defense, the use of footwork that JDM was showing in his fight against Belal, I think that his team really knows how to prepare him correctly for dealing with guys who have a wrestling advantage and who are going to want to put him on his back and win that way. And I know that JDM is a knockout artist. I know that he's one of those guys who likes to swing for the fences. But I think that if he can spend the first 2 rounds fighting more like a pressure fighter, fighting more like a volume fighter, just using his striking and his footwork to make sure that he stays out of the grappling and just land as many shots as he can, go to the body as often as he can, just kind of start breaking Islam down with his powerful punches, not going for the knockout necessarily, but just hitting him as much as he can, putting his hands on him as much as he can while staying safe from the takedown threat. And I think if he can do that for the first 2 rounds, that by the third round, he's going to be able to start picking his shots and looking for a knockout. and I could be totally wrong about this. This is really kind of an unknown situation because of how Islam is moving up a weight class. Because when someone moves up a weight class, you always know that they're going to have a bit more energy. They're probably going to be a bit bigger, a bit stronger, but you never know exactly how it's going to look. You never know exactly how much stronger or how much more powerful they're going to be. And you never know how they're going to respond to getting hit by someone who is bigger than them, or in this case, their own size. Because again, both these guys are really natural welterweights. They're right around 5'10", 5'11". That's the ideal height for a welterweight who has like a mesomorph body type like Georges St-Pierre. And so I don't doubt that Islam is going to feel a lot better at this weight and that he's going to be able to do things at this weight that he couldn't do at lightweight. But I do think that the biggest difference for Islam coming up to welterweight, especially against JDM, is going to be that he's getting hit harder than he's used to. And the thing is that even though JDM is a power striker, even though he's a knockout artist, he's a guy who likes to swing hard, he also throws a lot of punches. I was actually looking at the UFC stats here, and I was really surprised to realize that JDM has both more significant strikes landed per minute and a higher striking accuracy than Belal Muhammad. And the reason that that was a little bit surprising is because JDM is known as more of a knockout artist, and Belal is known as more of a pressure fighter and a volume fighter. But despite the fact that Belal probably throws more punches overall than JDM does, they don't have that statistic here, but that is kind of my guess. JDM still lands significantly more significant strikes per minute than Belal, and he has higher striking accuracy. And with his average significant strikes per minute being 6.84, that means that he could be landing anywhere from 5 to 10 significant punches per minute on Makhachev. And I just think that even if he doesn't land something that really hurts him significantly or that knocks him down in the first couple rounds, I think that those are going to add up. And that's why I'm saying that I think Islam's best bet, his most likely path to victory, is to get on top in a dominant position in round one. And that's why I think JDM's best path to victory is to not go all out in round one, to not swing for a knockout in round one, because anytime that he really loads up on a punch, that is going to give Islam a chance to get in on a takedown. And this is actually something that I noticed when I was watching the Makhachev-Poirier fight. Almost every takedown that Makhachev landed on Poirier either happened because Islam landed a couple shots and stunned Poirier, and then he used that to clinch and get the takedown, or because Poirier was loading up on these big shovel punches that he likes to throw, and that was causing him to overextend a little bit, and that's how Makhachev got in on those takedowns. And so I think JDM is definitely a sharper, more technical striker than Poirier, and he definitely has better footwork. So if he can use that footwork, if he can use that sharp striking, and if he can avoid getting hit by anything significant and avoid putting too much energy into his punches where he's overextending himself, then I think he can make it through the first two rounds while doing damage. And if he can make it through the first two rounds without getting put on his back in a dominant position, then I think by the time they get to the third round, Makhachev is going to be hurting enough that he's going to start to slow down, not necessarily because of a cardio issue, but because he's just taken the toll of being hit about 6 to 7 times a minute by the hardest puncher he's ever had a professional fight against. And so this is very difficult to measure, obviously, because I don't know exactly how hard JDM can hit, and I don't know exactly what Islam's resilience is. It's really just a feeling that I was getting as I was rewatching these fights. And over the years, I've seen lots of guys move up in weight classes, and some of them do it successfully, some of them do it not so successfully, but everyone always talks about how I'm moving up a weight class, so I'm going to feel so much better. I'm going to be able to eat more. I'm going to be able to sleep better. I'm going to have better cardio. I'm going to be stronger. They never talk about the fact that now they're going to be getting hit by a guy who hits significantly harder than anyone that they fought before in their career. And don't get me wrong, Islam has fought some very good strikers who are known for having powerful shots, like Drew Dober and Dan Hooker, both good strikers, both who are known for hitting hard. Charles Oliveira, known for his knockouts, but I don't think that any of them have quite the same level of technical proficiency as JDM. And again, just being that much bigger, that much more powerful, and that much more in his prime, I think is going to make a huge difference. And the last video that I did like this was for the matchup between Dricus du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev. And that was kind of a similar situation. I don't think Chimaev was moving up a weight class, but DDP was the reigning champion, and Chimaev was obviously the better wrestler. And I did a video beforehand talking about how DDP could potentially win the fight. I didn't pick him to win because I did think Chimaev was going to win, but I did a video talking about how DDP could potentially win. And then I did a video afterwards talking about what he could potentially learn from the fight. And in doing research for that video, I saw some comments from Dricus du Plessis and from his coach talking about how they prepared for Chimaev. And DDP's coach literally said, "We didn't practice the crucifix position." And that was like, in that fight, DDP got put in the crucifix. Like, he got mounted and crucifixed in, I think, every round. He just constantly got taken down, put through all the positions, almost submitted multiple times, held down for a lot of the fight. And then afterwards, his coach says, "Oh yeah, we didn't practice that." And that's just baffling to me, because really any time that you're preparing for an MMA fight, but especially when you're preparing for an MMA fight against a guy you know is a better wrestler than you, one of the main parts of your training camp should be where you lay on your back in the middle of the mats and guys who are better wrestlers than you take turns holding you down until you get back up. And so you wouldn't necessarily have to specifically practice the crucifix position, like, okay, now we're going to do crucifix escapes. But if you had a bunch of high-level wrestlers starting on top of you in a dominant position where they can just choose whatever position they want, and the guy who's preparing for the fight has to find a way to escape that, then he would have practiced crucifix escapes, because at some point someone would have crucifixed him if they prepared properly for that. So that was just wild to me. And when I was watching JDM fight Bilal Muhammad, just based on my own observations, but also based on what Daniel Cormier, the commentators, were saying, and the commentators were Daniel Cormier and Dominic Cruz, both, of course, former UFC champions. Daniel Cormier, former Olympic wrestler. And I think those are two of the best fighters turned analysts, because they're both very high fight IQ guys who really analyze things and break them down. And both of them complimented JDM's wrestling defense and awareness on multiple occasions. And I'm not just talking about like his sprawl or his takedown defense once someone's trying to take him down. I'm talking about how he intelligently positions himself to avoid being put in a situation where he can be easily taken down. And that's exactly what Dricus du Plessis didn't do when he fought Khamzat Chimaev, but JDM did that when he fought Bilal. And I think that's the reason why Bilal only got 3 takedowns, and every takedown that he got was just a beautiful example of takedown technique. He set it up properly and he executed it to perfection, because that was the only way that he could get JDM on the mat. And so if Islam can do that to JDM in the first round or in the second round, especially the beginning of the second round, that is where I think he has the best chance of winning. But I do think that JDM has the tools and the team to prepare him to avoid that, to have a strategy where he's going to fight really smart in the first 2 rounds. And then starting in the third round, he's going to start throwing a little bit harder. He's going to start loosening up, looking for that knockout. And I don't know if he'll get it or not. Islam is so tough, and he's only been knocked out once in his career back in 2015. But I wouldn't be too surprised to see that happen. And although it's a very even money fight for me, and I can certainly see either guy winning, I do think that JDM should actually be a slight favorite, which is the opposite of what the betting odds are saying. Right now, the betting lines are putting JDM at a very slight underdog and Islam at a very slight favorite. I think it should be the other way around, but I'm probably not going to put any money on this fight anyways, because it's such a small underdog that it's barely even worth it. But I am really looking forward to watching this fight. So interested to see what's going to happen. And I'm definitely going to make a video breaking down this fight afterwards. I'm hoping that I'll have time tomorrow to do a video about the ways that I think Islam can win, even though I covered that a little bit here. But I might not have time for that. So this might be my last video until next week. Again, please like and subscribe if you want to see more. Leave me a comment if you got something to say. But I will definitely next week do a video breaking down this fight and talking about why I was right or why I was wrong. And like I said, I don't have a high level of certainty that JDM is going to win. I think it's like 51-49 in terms of likelihood, but I do give him a slight edge, because I think there's one thing that Islam can't calculate and can't prepare for coming into this fight, and that is going to be how it actually feels when JDM hits him. But I'm really looking forward to seeing that, looking forward to hearing from you in the comments, and I'll be back soon with another video.